I sat in the second row, hands folded on my lap, watching the defense attorney adjust his cufflinks. He had that look, the one successful men wear when they know the room belongs to them. Behind him, Councilman Gerald Pruitt sat with his spine straight, his jaw set in that expression of wounded dignity he perfected over the last 18 months. His son, Tyler, slouched beside him, picking at his thumbnail. The sheriff, Walt Hoskins, occupied the far end of the bench, arms crossed, his badge catching the overhead lights. The gallery was full. I recognized most of the faces, neighbors who'd stopped returning my calls, the youth pastor who'd once told me to let God handle justice, the clerk from a hardware store who now looked away when I came in. They'd all come to witness my final humiliation, I suppose, to see the grieving father finally put to rest his dangerous obsession. Judge Callahan sighed as my attorney, a young woman named Jordan Rice, approached the bench. She was 26, fresh from the public defender's office, the only lawyer in 3 counties willing to take my case after the others had politely declined. The judge didn't bother hiding his exhaustion. "Ms. Rice, we've been over this." The accident report was thoroughly. "Your Honor," she interrupted, her voice steady, "we have new evidence, aerial surveillance footage that directly contradicts the official narrative." The murmur that rippled through the courtroom felt like static electricity. I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes forward, on the screen being wheeled to the center of the room. The defense attorney, Mitchell Carver, who charged $400 an hour, actually laughed. Not loud, just a quick exhale through his nose, the kind that says this again. "Aerial surveillance?" Carver's tone dripped with theatrical disbelief. "Your Honor, Mr. Brennan has been harassing my clients with conspiracy theories for over a year. This is just another—" "Let's see it." The judge said, cutting him off. He didn't sound curious. He sounded tired. The lights dimmed. Jordan connected her laptop to the projector, and the screen flickered to life. For a moment, there was only static, then trees. The canopy of Ridgeway Park from above, early evening light, filtering through the branches. The timestamp in the corner read June 14th, 6:47 p.m., 32 minutes before my son died. The drone's camera swept across the gravel path, past the curve where the woods thickened. Headlights appeared in the frame. A truck, dark blue, moving too fast for the posted limit. Then another angle as the drone turned, catching a figure on a bike. My son's red backpack visible even from that height. I heard someone behind me shift in their seat. The sheriff uncrossed his arms. The footage continued. The truck disappeared around the bend. The bike kept moving. Then the screen went dark for exactly 8 seconds before resuming at a different angle, closer to the ground now, as if the drone had descended on its own. What it captured next made Councilman Pruitt lean forward, his face going pale. They'd told me I was seeing ghosts and pixels. That grief had made me paranoid, maybe even dangerous. My ex-wife had used the word unhinged during our last phone call. The department psychologist had suggested medication. But grief doesn't manufacture evidence. People do. That's when I remembered how it really began. It was 18 months earlier when Sheriff Hoskins knocked on my door at 7 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I'd been awake since 5, working on a land survey report that was due by noon. The coffee was still hot in my hand when I opened the door and saw his face. That careful blankness cops were when they're about to ruin your life. He didn't have to say anything. I already knew. You know before they speak. Your body knows. "There's been an accident," he said. "It's Nathan." The hospital was 12 minutes away, but I don't remember the drive. I remember the fluorescent lights in the corridor, the smell of disinfectant, the way the nurse couldn't meet my eyes when she led me to the room where they'd put him. My son, 15 years old, his face peaceful, like he was sleeping, except for the unnatural stillness that separates sleep from everything else. They said he'd crashed his bike on the blind curve near Ridgeway Park. Head trauma. They said it was quick, that he hadn't suffered. People always say that, as if speed makes death kinder. The police report came 3 days later. Officer Trevor Walsh had written it. Young guy, maybe 24, always polite at the coffee shop. The report was 4 pages long. Reckless operation of bicycle. Failed to navigate curve. No helmet recovered at scene. Speed estimated at 20 to 25 miles per hour. No other vehicles involved. I read it 7 times that first night, sitting at the kitchen table while my ex-wife, Diane, packed Nathan's clothes upstairs. Each time I read it, something felt wrong, but grief makes you doubt everything, even your own thoughts. The funeral was on a Thursday. The whole town turned out, or at least it seemed that way. Councilman Pruitt arrived with his wife and Tyler, all of them in black, faces arranged in appropriate sorrow. Pruitt found me by the cemetery gates afterward, pulled me into a hug that lasted too long, his cologne overwhelming. "Terrible tragedy," he whispered into my ear. "But it was an accident, Owen. Just a terrible accident. Not a crime." The way he said it, like he was instructing me, not consoling me, made something cold settle in my chest. I pulled away and saw Tyler standing behind his father, hands in his pockets, staring at his shoes. The kid was 17, drove a dark blue Silverado his father had bought him for his birthday. I'd seen it around town, always going too fast. The questions started small. Why wasn't Nathan's helmet at the scene when I knew he'd left the house wearing it? I'd watched him strap it on, had reminded him about the broken clasp. Why did the skid marks in the photos start 6 feet before the curve, not at the curve itself? Why was there a gauge in the gravel's shoulder that the report didn't mention? I called Sheriff Hoskins, left 3 messages. When he finally called back, his voice had lost its sympathy. "Owen, I understand you're grieving, but the investigation is closed. Sometimes accidents are just accidents." I started asking around town. Diane told me to stop. "You're making people uncomfortable," she said. We were sitting in what used to be our living room. We'd been divorced for 2 years, but she'd come back to help sort through Nathan's things. "They think you're looking for someone to blame." I asked her if she'd read the report. She said she couldn't, that it was too painful. I realized then that I was alone in this. 2 weeks after the funeral, I was at Maggie's diner getting lunch when I heard laughter from the back booth. 3 deputies, including Walsh, the one who'd written the report. Grieving detective, one of them said, loud enough to carry. Got himself a corkboard and red string. Probably. More laughter. Hoskins was there too, shaking his head with a smile. Poor bastard. Can't accept that sometimes kids make stupid choices. I left my sandwich untouched and walked out. That night, I filed a formal request for the dash cam footage from Tyler Pruitt's truck. The response came back in 5 days. No footage available. File corrupted. I sat at my desk, staring at that single line on the official letterhead, and something cracked open inside me. Not rage. Something colder. I looked across the room at Nathan's workbench, the one I'd built him for his 14th birthday. His drone sat there, the DJI Phantom he'd saved up for, his propellers still dusty from his last flight. His last flight. The realization hit me like ice water. Nathan had been flying that drone the day he died. He'd mentioned it at breakfast. Said he wanted to get footage of the sunset over the park. And that model, I knew because I'd helped him set it up, had automatic cloud backup enabled. I pulled my laptop toward me and typed in his login credentials with shaking hands. The cloud folder loaded slowly, my internet connection stuttering in the quiet house. It was past midnight. Diane had stopped calling. My supervisor at the surveying firm had left a voicemail about missed deadlines. I hadn't showered in 3 days. None of it mattered. The progress bar crept across the screen. 67%, 73%, 88%. And then the folder opened. 43 video files, each time-stamped and geotagged. The most recent was dated June 14th, 6:34 p.m. 13 minutes before the accident, report claimed Nathan had crashed. I clicked on it. The video player opened, and I watched my son's final flight through his drone's camera. The park from above, golden light streaming through the trees, the gravel path winding through the woods like a gray ribbon. My hands were trembling so badly I had to set down my coffee. I watched it 3 times that first night, then 3 more times. By sunrise, I'd watched it 11 times, taking notes, screenshotting frames, mapping the drone's flight path against the survey maps I had of the area. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. That's when I stopped answering the door. Diane came by on Saturday, knocked for 10 minutes. Finally called and left a message saying I was spiraling and needed help. My brother drove up from Indianapolis the following week, stood on the porch yelling that I was scaring people. The neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, started leaving casseroles on the steps, always with a note that said, "Praying for peace." I let them pile up until the raccoons found them. The youth pastor stopped by twice, talked to the mail slot about letting go and God's plan. I sat on the other side of the door, silent, waiting for him to leave. Inside, the house transformed. I took down the living room curtains to let in more light, pushed the furniture against the walls, and set up my workspace. Nathan's drone sat on the coffee table, connected to my laptop by a tangle of cables. I bought a large corkboard from a hardware store. The clerk's hand shook when she rang me up and mounted it on the wall. Printed screenshots went up first, then the police report pages, then hand-drawn maps of the accident site with measurements and angles marked in red ink. I used string to connect related items, the way I'd seen in documentaries about unsolved cases. The deputies at the diner had mocked that image, but they'd been right. This was exactly what I'd become. I stopped going to work. My supervisor, Frank Castillo, called it a temporary leave, but we both knew what it meant. I didn't care. I had savings. I had time. I had 43 video files and an accident report that didn't match reality. Every morning I drove to Ridgeway Park with my measuring tape, notebook, and camera. I walked the curve where Nathan died, photographing it from every angle, documenting the sight lines, the slope of the road, the trees that block visibility. I measured the distance from the curve to the shoulder where the bike was found, 17 feet. The report said he'd lost control on the curve, but the bike wasn't on the curve. It was 17 feet past it, in the gravel near the tree line. I took soil samples from the tire grooves, though I had no way to analyze them. It just felt like something I should do, like evidence I might need later. People started talking. I'd see them in town, watch their expressions change when they noticed me. The word obsessed followed me through the grocery store aisles. Unstable whispered behind hands at the gas station. Sheriff Hoskins stopped his patrol car next to mine one afternoon while I was parked at the accident site. He got out, walked over, leaned against my hood. "Owen, this isn't healthy. You need to move on." I asked him why the dashcam file was corrupted. He said these things happen. Technology fails. I asked him why Officer Walsh's report didn't mention the helmet. He straightened up, his face hardening. "I'm going to say this once. The investigation is closed. If you keep harassing my department, we're going to have a problem." He drove away, and I went back to measuring. At night, I reviewed the drone footage frame by frame, using software I pirated from a forensics website. I learned about metadata, GPS coordinates, altitude readings, camera angles, and shadow analysis. I cross-referenced the drone's timestamp of the sunset time that day, 6:52 p.m., and worked backward. Nathan's bike appeared in frame at 6:47 p.m., 5 minutes before sunset. The report claimed the accident occurred at 7:19 p.m., well after dark, but the drone showed evening light, clear visibility. Someone had changed the time. It was during the 47th viewing, 3 months after Nathan died, that I saw it, a reflection in the drone's lens as it banked left over the curve. 2 vehicles, not one. The second set of headlights was faint, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. I froze the frame, enhanced it, printed it in high resolution. My hands didn't shake anymore. They were steady as I pinned the image to the corkboard, drew a red circle around the lights, and wrote underneath, "Second vehicle, unaccounted for." I sat back and stared at the wall of evidence. The house was silent, except for the hum of my laptop fan. Diane was right. I had spiraled, but I'd spiraled toward something true. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was hunting. The turning point came on a Tuesday in late September when I walked into the county records office and met Jordan Rice. She was filing papers at the front desk, her intern badge clipped to a blazer that looked borrowed. 26, maybe 27, with tired eyes and a coffee stain on her sleeve. I'd been to this office 6 times already, each time stonewalled by the senior clerks who'd suddenly become very interested in procedural technicalities whenever I requested documents. But Jordan looked up when I approached, and more importantly, she didn't look away. "I need to file a motion to reopen a case," I said, sliding my folder across the counter. "Wrongful death. New evidence." She opened it, glanced at the first page, then looked at me with recognition. "You're Nathan Brennan's father." Not a question. I nodded. She closed the folder and lowered her voice. "I'm not supposed to say this, but I grew up 3 blocks from Ridgeway Park. I knew your son. Not well, but I knew him. He helped my little sister with her science project last year." She paused, choosing her words carefully. The whole thing never sat right with me. We met at a coffee shop in the next town over, 30 miles from anyone who might report back to Hoskins or Pruitt. Jordan explained that she was in her final semester of law school, working at the county office to get practical experience before the bar exam. She'd read Nathan's case file while processing routine paperwork and noticed the same inconsistencies I had. The corrupted dashcam file was listed as technical failure, but the report was signed off within 18 hours, she said. That's not standard protocol for a fatal accident. Usually there's at least a week of review, especially when minors are involved. She stirred her coffee, not drinking it. "I can help you file a formal records request citing administrative irregularities. It won't guarantee anything, but it creates a paper trail. Makes it harder for them to ignore you." We filed a request that afternoon. I paid the fee in cash, got the stamp receipt, and drove home feeling something I hadn't felt in months: momentum. That night, I bought a newer drone, a DJI Mavic with better stabilization and higher resolution. I needed to recreate Nathan's flight path exactly, prove the timestamps were accurate, show that the lighting conditions as footage matched the actual sunset time. I spent 2 weeks practicing, learning the controls, flying the same route over and over until I could replicate its trajectory within 3 feet of accuracy. The data was everything. I downloaded weather reports from June 14th. Clear skies, visibility 10 miles, sunset at 6:52 p.m. I pulled traffic camera footage from the intersection 2 miles from the park, found Tyler Pruitt's blue Silverado passing through at 6:39 p.m., heading toward Ridgeway. The timestamp was public record, impossible to dispute. I documented it all, cross-referenced it with Nathan's drone metadata, built a timeline that left no gaps. Each night, I added another piece to the wall: witness statements I collected from the 3 joggers who'd been in the park that evening, accident reconstruction diagrams I'd drawn using professional surveying software, cell tower data that showed Nathan's phone pinging from the park at 6:48 p.m., not 7:19 p.m. like the report claimed. Sheriff Hoskins called it "seeing ghosts in pixels" during a town council meeting in October. Someone recorded it, and the clip made it onto the local Facebook group. He stood at the podium, shaking his head with paternal disappointment. "We have a grieving father who's convinced himself of conspiracy because he can't accept that his son made a fatal mistake. It's tragic, but it's also dangerous. He's harassing local families, making wild accusations based on grainy footage and amateur detective work. We need to be compassionate, but we also need to be realistic." The council members nodded. Councilman Pruitt sat in the front row, his face grave with concern. The comments on the video were worse. People I'd known for years calling me delusional, suggesting psychiatric intervention, saying I was dishonoring Nathan's memory by refusing to let him rest. But arrogance is predictable. That's what I learned. Powerful people get comfortable in their power, stop checking their blind spots. I knew Hoskins wouldn't review the case file again. Why would he? It was closed, signed, filed away. I knew Pruitt wouldn't worry about some unhinged father with a drone. I was a nuisance, not a threat. That confidence was my advantage. Jordan helped me compile everything into a formal complaint, 167 pages, indexed and cross-referenced, with an appendix of digital files burned onto 3 separate drives. We submitted 1 copy to the district attorney's office in November, sent another to the State Police Internal Affairs Division, and locked a third in a fireproof safe I bought specifically for this purpose. The envelope was marked Exhibit in black permanent marker. I put it in the safe, spun the dial, and went to bed at a reasonable hour for the first time in 6 months. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from the DA's office. They were reviewing the complaint. A preliminary investigation had been opened. No promises, no timeline, but it was happening. I didn't celebrate. I made more coffee, went back to my wall of evidence, and waited. Patience wasn't noble. It was the only strategy left. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall. Inside, the laptop hummed, the hard drive spun, and the calendar on my wall showed 37 days circled in red. Every day I'd spent building the case that would finally force someone to look at what I'd found. The calendar would grow longer before this ended. But time was something I had plenty of. The courtroom lights dimmed further as Jordan advanced the footage. I didn't move, didn't blink. I'd watched this sequence 463 times over the past 18 months, knew every frame, every shadow, every pixel. But this was different. This was the first time anyone else was watching it with the weight of law behind them. The drone's camera showed Nathan riding along the path at 6:47 p.m., his red backpack visible, his posture relaxed. He was coasting, not racing. The evening light was golden, clear. Visibility was perfect. You could see the curve ahead, see the trees on either side, see everything. The timestamp in the corner was precise, unalterable, verified by 3 independent digital forensics experts whose reports sat in the folder on Jordan's table. Then the truck appeared, dark blue Silverado, coming fast around the blind curve from the opposite direction. Tyler Pruitt's truck, the one that wasn't supposed to be there, the one the report never mentioned. I heard someone gasp behind me. Councilman Pruitt leaned forward in his seat, his face losing color. Tyler had gone very still, his hands gripped together in his lap. The truck swerved. Not wildly, but enough. Nathan tried to avoid it, pulled right toward the shoulder. His bike wobbled on the gravel. He went down hard, the drone's camera catching the moment of impact. The bike skidding sideways, Nathan's body rolling twice before coming to rest near the tree line. The drone hovered for another 8 seconds, its programming keeping it stable, recording everything. The truck had stopped 50 yards past a curve, brake lights glowing red in the dimming light. Then the footage cut to black for exactly 8 seconds. When it resumed, the angle had changed. The drone had descended, possibly reacting to Nathan's remote dropping, possibly returning to home position. What it captured from this new, lower angle made Judge Callahan sit up straight. Tyler Pruitt was out of the truck, running back toward Nathan. But he wasn't alone. A second figure emerged from a vehicle that hadn't been visible in the first angle. A white Ford Explorer with county plates. Sheriff Hoskins. He was in civilian clothes, no uniform, but his face was unmistakable. The two of them reached Nathan's body. Tyler crouched down, put his hands on his head. Hoskins looked around, scanning the area, his body language deliberate, calculating. He said something to Tyler, gestured toward the bike. Tyler grabbed it, dragged it 17 feet off the path into the gravel near the trees. Hoskins walked the scene, head down, studying the skid marks. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. 37 seconds later, he ended the call and looked directly up, straight at the drone, which was hovering at 40 feet, its red recording light blinking in the gathering dusk. The footage showed Hoskins point at the drone. Tyler followed his gaze. Hoskins said something else, made another gesture, and both men got back in their vehicles. The trucks left in opposite directions. Nathan's bike lay in the gravel, where they'd moved it. Nathan himself was no longer visible in the frame, hidden by the angle and the shadows. The drone hovered for another 3 minutes before its battery died, and it descended into the trees, landing in the underbrush 20 yards from where my son died. Jordan paused the footage. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Not the silence of anticipation. The silence of shock, of reality reshaping itself in real time. Judge Callahan removed his glasses, cleaned them slowly, put them back on. He looked at Hoskins, who had gone gray, his arms no longer crossed, his hands gripping the edge of the bench. He looked at Councilman Pruitt, whose mouth was opening and closing without sound. He looked at Tyler, who was crying silently, shoulders shaking. Then the judge looked at me. "Mr. Brennan, would you approach the bench, please?" I stood. My legs were steady. I'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, rehearsed in my head while driving to the park, while measuring the accident site, while sitting alone in my house at 3 a.m. But I hadn't imagined the quiet. I thought there would be shouting, denials, chaos. Instead, there was just this terrible, absolute silence. I walked to the bench. Jordan stood beside me, her hand briefly touching my elbow, a gesture of solidarity, or maybe just reassurance that this was real, that we'd made it here. Your Honor, I said, and my voice came out steady, calm, exactly the way I practiced. That's my son's drone. DJI Phantom 4, serial number verified and submitted as Exhibit C. It recorded his last ride. It recorded the accident. It recorded what happened after. I paused, turned slightly to look at Hoskins and Pruitt. It saw what I wasn't allowed to see, what they made sure I couldn't see. Judge Callahan nodded slowly. He looked at the defense table, where Mitchell Carver was frantically whispering to his clients. Mr. Carver, does your client wish to respond to this evidence? Carver stood, but his usual confidence was gone. Your Honor, we need time to review this footage, to verify its authenticity, to... 3 independent forensic analysts verified it. Jordan interrupted. Their reports are in your packet. The metadata is intact. The timestamps are confirmed by weather data, traffic cameras, and cell tower records. This footage is authentic and unaltered. The judge held up his hand. I've seen enough for now. He looked at Hoskins. Sheriff, I'm going to recommend the State Attorney General's office take over this investigation immediately. You're to surrender your badge and weapon to the bailiff. He turned to Tyler Pruitt. Mr. Pruitt, you'll remain in custody pending arraignment on charges of vehicular manslaughter and leaving the scene of a fatal accident. Finally, he looked at Councilman Pruitt. Councilman, I suggest you secure legal counsel. Conspiracy charges may be forthcoming. The courtroom erupted then. People shouting. Reporters rushing for the doors. The bailiff calling for order. Hoskins sat motionless, staring at nothing. Tyler was sobbing openly now, his father's arm around him. But Pruitt's face had gone hard and distant, already planning defense strategies, already calculating damage control. Carver was gathering his papers with shaking hands. I stood there, hands at my sides, and felt nothing close to triumph. Jordan touched my arm. We did it, she said quietly. I nodded but didn't respond. What was there to say? My son was still dead. Justice didn't resurrect. It only rearranged the truth. The bailiff escorted Hoskins and Tyler out through the side door. Councilman Pruitt followed his own attorney toward the exit, refusing to look in my direction. The gallery slowly emptied. Neighbors who'd call me delusional, colleagues who'd stop returning my calls, people who'd whispered about my mental state in grocery store aisles. Some of them looked ashamed now. Most just looked confused, like they walked into the wrong movie. When the room was nearly empty, I walked back to my seat and picked up my jacket. Jordan was packing her laptop, organizing the evidence folders. The DA wants to meet tomorrow, she said. There will be more hearings, depositions, probably a full trial. This isn't over. I know, I said. Are you okay? I thought about that question. Was I okay? I'd spent 18 months dismantling my life to get to this moment. I'd lost my job, my marriage, most of my friends. I'd become the person everyone warned their children about, the obsessed father who couldn't let go. And now I was standing in an emptying courtroom where 3 men had just been destroyed by the truth I'd refused to stop searching for. No, I said finally, but I'm breathing. We walked out together into the late afternoon sunlight. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, cameras, microphones thrust forward. I ignored them all, kept walking until I reached my truck in the parking lot. Jordan said goodbye, promised to call tomorrow about the meeting with the DA. I thanked her, got in, and sat there for a long time with the engine off, watching the courthouse empty. A text came through on my phone. Diane. 3 words. I'm so sorry. I didn't reply. I started the truck and drove home to the town that called me crazy, past the diner where deputies had mocked me, past the church where people had prayed for my peace while ignoring my questions, past Ridgeway Park where my son had died and no one had cared enough to look closely at why. The house was quiet when I got there. The evidence wall was still up, though I didn't need it anymore. I walked over to Nathan's drone, still sitting on the coffee table where I'd left it that morning. I'd picked it up carefully, turned it over my hands. This small machine had done what the entire sheriff's department refused to do. It had told the truth. I carried it to the workbench Nathan had used, set it down gently, and turned on the desk lamp. Outside, the sun was setting, 6:52 p.m., same time as that day 18 months ago. Same golden light, same long shadows. Some eyes never close again. Mine hadn't. Maybe they never would. But for the first time since Nathan died, I wasn't looking for ghosts and pixels anymore. I was just looking at the empty space where my son used to be. 3 years later, I'm sitting on the same bench at Ridgeway Park where I used to measure skid marks and photograph sightlines. The trees have grown taller. Someone planted wildflowers along the path, and there's a new sign at the trailhead about bike safety. The blind curve was re-engineered 6 months after the trial. Better visibility, warning signs, a mirror mounted on the oak tree, so drivers can see what's coming. Small changes. Too late for Nathan, but maybe not too late for someone else's son. The trials took 14 months. Hoskins got 6 years for obstruction of justice and evidence tampering. Tyler Pruitt got 4 years for vehicular manslaughter and leaving the scene. Served 2 with good behavior. Got out last spring. Councilman Pruitt was never charged criminally but resigned from the council, left town, moved somewhere in Arizona, according to the last I heard. Officer Walsh, who wrote the false report, lost his badge. The department brought in new leadership, new protocols. The town pretended it had always cared about accountability. I kept the house but took down the evidence wall. Donated most of Nathan's things except the drone, which sits on a shelf in my office. I went back to surveying work, different firm, different clients. People still recognize me sometimes at the grocery store or the gas station, but they don't whisper anymore. Mostly they just nod, uncomfortable, unsure what to say to the man who was right when everyone said he was crazy. Jordan passed the bar exam, opened a small practice specializing in wrongful death cases. She sends me referrals sometimes. Families who've lost someone and can't get straight answers from the authorities. I help when I can, usually with the technical side, recovering digital evidence, analyzing footage, mapping accident scenes. I don't charge. It's not about money. It's about making sure someone looks closely when it matters. Diane remarried. We talked occasionally, mostly about Nathan, keeping his memory alive in the small ways parents do. She says I did the right thing, that Nathan would be proud. I don't know about that. Pride feels like the wrong word for what happened. Justice is supposed to feel clean, final. It doesn't. It just feels like a rearrangement of grief. Still heavy, just distributed differently. A family passes by the bench, 2 kids racing ahead on bikes while their parents follow behind. The kids are wearing helmets, riding carefully, laughing in that unself-conscious way children do. I watch them disappear around the curve, the new mirror catching their reflections. I pull out the small drone I brought with me, not Nathan's, but a newer model I use for consulting work. I launch into the clear evening sky, watch it climb above the tree line. The camera tilts down, capturing the park from above, the winding path, the memorial flowers, the bench where I'm sitting. The light is golden, same as it always is this time of day. The drone hovers there for a moment, a small mechanical witness. Then I bring it back down, pack it away. I stand, stretch, and walk back to my truck. Tomorrow there's another family who needs help, another case where the official story doesn't match the evidence. Some eyes never close again. But sometimes that's exactly what the world needs, someone who refuses to stop looking, even when everyone else has turned away. I drive home as the sun sets behind me, casting long shadows across the road. Nathan's last flight showed me the truth. Now I spend my days making sure other people's truths don't get buried in corrupted files and convenient lies. It's not peace, but it's purpose. And some days that's enough.